Hello and welcome to another edition of Touchline Hotspur. I'll be your host today, Sai, and today I've got some regular faces with me. Owen, how you doing, brother?
Rhetorical question that is, mate. We'll see how that goes throughout this pod. As I know, I'm just trying to draw some energy from a dejected self.
Definitely. I think that's going to be mirrored in the next two responses too. We've also got Teacher with us today. How's it going, bro?
Well, if it was just one word I wanted to give you, it would be frustration.
Yeah.
One word answer, frustration. But otherwise, can't complain. Still alive, still kicking. Happy to be here.
That's good, man. We'll vent. And last but not least, we've got Jack.
Just losing the will to live, really. But you know what? There's more to life than football, I think. I hope.
I think it's a good time for you to post the Logic meme that you put up before.
Yeah.
Go viral again.
Yeah.
Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the pod, obviously we've got the housekeeping. If you're not already, make sure that you're following us on Twitter, Instagram at Touchline Hotspur, or Spurs_Touchline, I should say. We've also moved a lot of our content back onto the main Touchline Fracas YouTube channel. So make sure that you're checking in there as well to keep up to date with all of our video content. And of course, you can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all of that good stuff. So before we get into the match reviews, two diabolical performances back to back, there is quite a fair bit of news to get to. First and foremost, Gedson Fernandez has left the club. He has had his loan terminated. And he's heading to Galatasaray off the back of returning back to his parent club. Are we going to miss him?
We're not going to miss him. I'm just happy, like, in the sense we're not ruining a young man's career. I still think there's a fairly good player there if he can get some love from a club, which unfortunately it wasn't with us. So yeah, I'm happy we actually managed to offload one player who we're not using to any effect.
Does anyone have any standout moments for Gedson in his short stint with the club? He spent
not particularly. We've seen it happen before with Spurs, where we get this young player who's full of promise from overseas, and we all think the world of, and comes with some excitement and potential. But as Owen rightly said, didn't get any love from us. Didn't get enough time to really make any sort of stamp on any game that I can remember. But fair play to him. He's still got his future ahead of him, and we wish him well. I don't have any sour feelings about him. He didn't fuck anything up, so I wish him well personally.
Jack, how do you feel? Were you looking forward to us shelling out the 50 mil to keep him, or?
Oh man, I still don't know what his position is. I don't think anyone knows what his position is. How can you be at a club for a year and we still don't know if you're a winger, if you're a midfielder, if you're what was this guy's position?
To be fair, I think he was probably relegated to Jose Mourinho's house help over the stint of his time with Spurs, to be perfectly honest, because only Lord knows why he was at the club in the first place and what he's been doing behind the scenes. Because he's added absolutely nothing. On a slightly different tone, Gazzaniga has gone on loan to Elche in La Liga. Obviously, we brought in Joe Hart at the start of the season, and a lot was spoken about in terms of the homegrown quota and the foreign player quotas at the club. He's not played a single game all season. Do you feel like we've missed the trick keeping him at the club as opposed to the liability that is Joe Hart?
I just wish it was a permanent deal because we need the money. Not going to be around the bush. We need the money, and we clearly bought Joe Hart and ostracized him from the team just to kind of put him in the shop window. But it's another case. No one's buying what we're selling, and a young man who needs to get some games in his career has got a loan move. So I mean, fair play to him in that sense. But it's again another failing on us where we've not managed to get a permanent move for a player.
100%. Would anyone have preferred him to have been the second choice keeper over a Joe Hart, or is this just shit for shit, in for lack of a better phrase of it?
I mean, never really rated Gazzaniga, but he's not the worst second choice keeper in the world. And we've named the podcast before Hologram Hart. Like he's non-existent as a keeper. What is the point? I don't know what happened to him psychologically with his confidence or what have you, but he doesn't look like a professional goalkeeper anymore. It's gone beyond being just a bad goalkeeper itself. He looks like a shadow of any professional player at all. He's so bad. Any shot that comes his way, it is in. It's in. We've seen it in the Europa League. How many times? How many goals?
Way too many. I think with Gazzaniga, me personally, I've always had a bit of an affinity to him. In terms of him as a second choice keeper, I don't think you can expect too much better from a second choice. But teacher, do you feel like Joe Hart can step it up without having that person behind him?
I feel a bit sorry for Joe Hart at times because he just had that shift in his career when Pep came to Man City and just literally froze him out of the team, and he was never the same after that. And he's gone all over the world, come back and not improved. And his best years are behind him, if we're being frank. He was I don't even know if he was a good goalkeeper once upon a time. He was hyped for a long time. But yeah, I think he's proven that he's not a goalkeeper that's going to consistently put any team in the top six. I think that's fair to say. And, if you've got ambitions to be in that ilk, then realistically, Joe Hart's not your man. Would I prefer Gazzaniga over Joe Hart as a second goalkeeper? Yes. Not by tons and bucket loads, because we had a stint where we saw Gazzaniga going at it for a while when Lloris was injured, didn't we? And to be fair, he didn't cover himself in glory. He rose to the occasion a few times, but the long and short of it is he didn't paint himself in goal. He didn't prove himself as a Premier League contender. So I suppose Joe Hart's in the conversation just over experience, really. But we've seen that's only going to get you so far. So I probably would have taken a punt on Gazzaniga on that basis. But yeah, we didn't sell him. He's still at the club. I'm not sure if that's potentially a case of we see him, in long-term future for Spurs, or whether it's a case of we just can't sell the fucker. But personally, I'd like to see him stick around for a little bit longer because I think his best years are still ahead of him.
One thing is for certain, he's going to be missed on all of the Hugo Boss adverts and things of that nature. Mr.
He was good looking though, to his credit. He is a good looking guy. He can get you a little subscription.
Gazzaniga's better looking.
Yeah, the professional model, I suppose. So, last but not least, in terms of the sort of news around the club, I would say. So Jose Mourinho has come out and acknowledged that Ndombele is ready to play in his natural centre midfield position, and that serves as a bit of a gateway for Dele to return back to the fold. It's even come out that Dele Alli has sort of had mediation talks with Jose Mourinho, and that Ndombele has sort of helped facilitate that as well. What do we make of all of this? Is this just more smoke and mirrors and a sort of an offshoot of what we've seen with Mourinho in the past? Or do we feel like he's genuinely making an attempt to mend bridges that he's broken?
I think it's a little bit of an attempt through him. Obviously, it was probably forced by Levy. I think that's from the reports we've been hearing, that Levy's kind of had to try and act as a mediator. And this press conference actually gave me quite a few positive feelings after the game, which we're actually about to talk about. Because obviously he mentioned that Ndombele is finally ready in his eyes. I think he's been ready a bit earlier than what he's saying, but he's ready in his eyes to play deeper. He's had these talks with Dele. Now, with these talks, I think it was forced not just for the good of Dele himself, but I think Dele's probably the most popular member of the squad. And, if you're getting someone like that on side, that's only going to boost morale for the team. So, I mean, yeah, I think it's mostly Jose having been forced to build bridges.
And do we feel like that admittance from Jose will lead to any sort of tactical improvements in the side, or do we feel like Delhi may be past the point of no return for us? I think, Jack, I'll pass that one to you because you're a big Delhi detractor, if you will.
The thing is, I mean, I loved Delhi when he was actually doing what he was doing. You know, we all loved him. You know, we all adored the way, you know, his bite alone in the team that he had. But obviously with the goals and the Ericsson connection, it was brilliant. But I think I just can't see any way. I just can't see any system in this country in English football that suits his style of play. And I think where we've gone past that, and I don't think I'll ever see us, get back to that. And obviously he has to go. With Jose, I just feel it's a PR move to get the fans sort of on side. Maybe, I'm not sure. It feels like he's been doing that a lot whenever he goes against his own principles, what have you. But he, I don't trust anything Jose says anymore. I think, I mean, we'll get onto the manager later on, but I just don't trust. You know, whenever there's something that you feel is an optimistic and forward-thinking move, Jose seems like he tends to show the opposite on the pitch whenever there's a game on. So, you can't really trust him.
Yeah. So moving into game reviews, if you will. So the first game of the week. So on Sunday we played Brighton. Obviously the result didn't go our way. We lined up with a 3-4-3, which we've seen glimpses of over the course of the season, but it's by no means our most natural shape moving into these games. What did you guys make of the lineup? So I'll chuck this one to you, teacher. We had Sissoko and Davis as wing backs. Is that something that you co-sign, or were you quite surprised?
That was off the back of the Oreo situation, wasn't it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not what Jose Mourinho would naturally do, I'd have to firstly say, to put things into context. Sissoko in that position, I can understand the decision-making process in terms of what other player do we have in our unit that's going to be able to play that role. He's going to be able to get up and down the pitch, be a physical presence, put himself about and disrupt play. I can get the thought process. However, in reality, what we've got is a player whose job is to help us in the transition in terms of driving, holding onto the ball, driving up the field, and giving the rest of our players a chance to get into their position so we can be an attacking threat through the channels. So when you take Sissoko in a position which he doesn't give you that, instead, what you've got is just a clutch running up and down the pitch. And it's not his fault. It's not his fault. He's playing out of position. In my opinion, no one in that team played well in that game. We struggled. And this is the thing that I've seen since Kane has left us. And I don't want to bang the whole Kane's not here drum. That's why we're not playing well, because I don't think that's necessarily the case. What I would say is we are struggling to find that space in between our midfielders and attackers, occupy that space to link up the play. And I think where we used to have a player would come deep and create those channels and create those passing lanes and those options and deliver it, we haven't got that anymore. So we're struggling. We don't have an identity. We can't attack as a team, as a unit, because the way in which we've been doing it historically, we just can't figure it out right now. But what pisses me off about it is that we've got a player that can link this all up for us in Dele Alli. And I know that he's not necessarily the person who you can look to and say he's going to be the answer to our problems, considering when he was playing, he wasn't in the great form anyway. But you got to take a punt on it. Because he's got experience in playing that exact same position where Kane was occupying space, coming deeper and finding passes. Dele Alli's done that time and time again. That's his whole game. So yeah, a lot that we missed out on. I don't think the formation worked for us personally, but I think he was trying to make the best out of a bad situation, and it didn't work out for us, and we lost 3 points as a result.
With regards to that, you mentioned some quite poignant points about Sissoko in terms of the role that suits his game the most. Obviously, Doherty hasn't played this game as a result of a poor performance in the game prior, albeit from a position that wasn't his own. So how much stock do we put in Jose's actual decision making in terms of what has lost us the game? Obviously, we saw Bale start, who has occupied that right-hand side with Doherty over the course of the Europa League campaign. So do we feel like he's sort of taking off his nose to spite his face in some instances by not riding some of the chemistry that he's supposedly been trying to build throughout the squad rotations over the course of the season?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's trying things out. I think, losing Kane's been a big blow. It meant that he's got to shuffle things around. He's got to consider new options and potentially play people in positions where they're not naturally where he put them. And I think his decision-making process has been done under some pressure. I think, realistically, Gareth Bale hasn't done anything necessarily to grant him first team play in the Premier League. I love Gareth Bale. I'm the first man when I heard Gareth Bale was coming to Tottenham, mate, I couldn't tell you the happiness that came in my heart. But the sad reality is he's not performing at a level that resembles the Gareth Bale that we all know and love. And playing him is really credit to his star power more than it is his current form. So, I think he's trying a thing, basically. And on this occasion, tactically, it didn't pay off because players aren't playing to their strengths. And on top of that, there's no unity, there's no unison, there's no gel. And the better players will stand out because obviously they have ability and whatnot. But when that star name isn't necessarily on the pitch, that person is generating everything, that person that gives us direction and driving power and force, then it just means that individually everyone getting found out, and there's no team unison. So it's just a bit frustrating. I don't blame Mourinho, but I think in times like this you just got to take it back to basics.
So Owen, as the cast member who was the most vocal about not really being pro Gareth Bale's return, where do you feel he actually fits within the pecking order?
Nowhere. Even for the start of the game, Tisha was right. When we've looking like we're going to be against it, we should go back to basics. And even for this game with the 3-4-3, I didn't hate this formation when we had Reguilon and Aurier. Obviously, Aurier fell out with Jose, Reguilon's injured. Okay, so this is a game where I wanted Doherty to start purely just so he wouldn't have an excuse. So he's playing his preferred position against favourable opposition. And, he made the point of playing Sissoko as well. It is what it is. He wanted to make the point as opposed to making the point to Doherty instead of going to basics. And for Bale, I think he's not been tone deaf to fans calling for him to play because, a lot of people still turn to him. Even when he wasn't at the club, people still saw him as the answer. In my opinion, I don't think he's ever been the answer. Even before Zidane ostracised him last season, he had been playing poorly. And I had the feeling, even though I did get caught up in the romance a little bit, I even done a skit to pretend that I was tracking his flight because I actually got quite excited that he was joining.
That's quality though.
But it's just been crazy. I don't even remember him doing anything in the game apart from receiving the ball on the half turn once and managing to get away from his man, pop off a pass once in the first half. So even with the right wing options we've got, I see Bergwijn ahead of him. I see Lucas ahead of him. I see even Lamela ahead of him. Which says a lot. I just think he's completely lost it. I don't think it's because he's out of love of football or just the lack of playing time over the last 2-3 years, and the injuries have caught up with him. It's a sad sight to see, but that's the reality for Bale. I don't really want to see him carrying on past this season.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Obviously, the chatter around Bale has been long-standing from the Pochettino days, and me on a personal note, I've never been pro him returning, especially if the style of play isn't a direct fit. And at the minute, he looks such a shadow of his former self that I can't really pinpoint what type of football would actually suit him, or even get a sort of level of production that is befitting a team of our stature, to put it bluntly. Is looking poor in terms of squad depth, and obviously we've got players like Vinicius who were struggling to make the team. Moving on to Chelsea, obviously we've seen a return to 4-2-3-1, so we've already scrapped the 3-4-3 experiment, if you will. We've seen us return to what looks like basics, with a centre forward, with Aurier coming back into the team, with a double pivot of Sissoko and Højbjerg, which obviously means Tongi got shifted forward to the 10 position. What do we make of this sort of indecision tactically? I'll leave this one to you, Jack, because obviously Perry Pulis is your man.
Oh man, I mean, to me, what it looks like is whatever the formation, whatever the tactical nous we expect this man to put in, the approach is always going to be the same. It's always going to be, the back line being 5 yards away from the keeper every time. It's always going to be a heavy reliance on two players going forward, and obviously a winger taking on a big defensive responsibility. That's usually Bergwijn. The sustainability of this football, we all knew at the beginning of the season we can't do this every game, but yeah, a man of such intellect, all of us, a number of years back when in the noughties, we thought this guy was a genius. This guy knew football, at the back of his hand. But I don't know. I can't even explain what it is. Part of it is obviously the players not buying into the system entirely. Part of it is the players not being good enough for this system. But equally, you cannot. When you're playing against teams, forget Chelsea. When you're playing against Brighton, when you're playing against Fulham, when you're playing against Crystal Palace, when you're playing against a poor Wolves side, and you're still playing the same system, the players are going to get fed up. Well, it's going to come back to haunt you, and it comes back to haunt you when we do it. When the manager thinks it's going well. I can't explain. I've done my whole ranting about it, but
it is looking very, very bleak. Obviously, this Chelsea game is finished 1-0. So that's back-to-back 1-0 defeats. 3 losses in the Premier League on the bounce. Very, very little in the way of any sort of attacking play from our side. And we are literally just throwing shit out a wall and hoping that it sticks. There doesn't really seem to be any way out of this predicament, and nothing exemplifies that more so than the mistake by Eric Dyer. It's not the first one this season. It's looking like it's not going to be the last. What do we put this down to? I'll go to you, teacher. Do you think he's just a bad player that's past it, or do you think there is a deeper, darker criminal link here?
We're talking about Eric Dyer, yeah?
Yeah.
Look, Eric Dyer has the right attributes to be a decent player. Firstly, let me say that now. He lacks the composure under pressure to make smart decisions. And I think he's too concerned about being the scapegoat that it makes him do irrational things. Today, on the floor, he was hacking away at man as if to say there weren't cameras on the pitch watching this. As if to say, man, we're going to watch that back and be like, yeah, that's cool. I was literally thinking, bro, that's just foolishness. And I don't want to be harsh because deep down, I kind of rate him. I'm not going to lie, I do. But he needs some mentorship. He needs someone to drag him by the fucking chin and just be like, bro, we got to play properly and we got to do this and we got to do that. Because underneath all of that nonsense, there's a player there, man. He's got decent feet. He can find a pass. He's strong. Once he gets moving, he's got a bit of pace. Like, he's not quick off the mark, but when he's been running for a bit, he'll catch up with you. And you'd like to think that if his decision-making got tweaked, if he had some moral support, then there could be someone there that we could invest in. But realistically, that's all he say, she say, and we can't live in the promised land. So fundamentally, he's not someone who we can look to put us in a position where we want to be as Champions League contenders, not actually to win the Champions League, but to play in the Champions League. So yeah, man. But I mean, we're not riddled with options. So I mean, what do we do really? We've got Alderweireld next to him. Sometimes we'll chop and change with Sanchez. We don't really have an identity to our back four anymore. And I think fundamentally, the type of football that Mourinho likes to play, that's going to work if you've got a back four that understand each other and understand each other's strengths and weaknesses and has a balance there. And I think there's times when it could look like that. If Reguilon's fit, when Ori is playing well, and if Dyer somehow manages to pull one out of the bag and has a decent, that's the weak link there. Alderweireld's past his best days. Don't get me wrong, he's past his best days, but you got to look at him and say, among the centre backs in the Premier League, he's still in the top 30%, in my opinion, top 30, 40%. Yeah, so enough to get you in the top 3-4. Logic and data would suggest. So
it's a really interesting one because obviously the mistake itself was akin to Booker T's Spinaroonie. That's what I thought. Doing windmills on the floor and shit. But as you said, for all intents and purposes, if you break down Eric Dyer as a footballer and as a centre back specifically, you do have all the attributes there to be a good footballer, and he's shown this in spurts since Project Restart that realistically he's probably our best centre back, pound for pound.
I'd debate that. I'd have to give it to Alderweireld just for now. I'd have to, because I've seen two.
I genuinely think that Alderweireld does not have any leadership thread in his body. I think we saw that enough when Vertonghen was there. He carried our back four. Anytime you paired Alderweireld with somebody else, there was that little bit of disjointed that left us prone to error. And I think that's where individual mistakes creep into a side, is where the dynamic between the centre-back pairing or the dynamic between the full-back and the guy in front of him, the wide forward or the winger, when those things don't work, you start to see these individual errors creep in a lot more.
I hear you, man. I hear you. I just got love for that boy because I've seen him, those last ditch. Basically, for me, he's the only defender that we have who's capable of making a last ditch standing challenge without giving away a penalty. And I've seen him do it time and time again, and I trust him for that. So for me, I trust him inside our box. Look how long he's been at Spurs for. How many times has he been a scapegoat for high-profile mistakes? Barely. Very rarely. And that's because
less than the rest of the guys, definitely.
Precisely. And that's because he knows where to put his feet. He's not an idiot in there. You would never see him doing what Dyer did today. Never. You would never see him do that. And I have to say that for facts. You would never see him do that.
To be fair, he probably wouldn't be close because once the back line is pretty much curtains for him now. Obviously, Eric Dyer is not the only player on the pitch, and his mistake did lead to the only goal in the game. We won't touch on Chelsea's football too much because it's still very, very early doors. They're still learning from Thomas Tuchel, and sort of that new manager bounce is pretty evident, if you ask me. Let's focus on another player who got an outing today, Vinicius. So he starts the game. If I'm not mistaken, this might be his first Premier League start this season. What do we make of him, generally and off of today's evidence?
I mean, his hold-up play isn't there. It's clear to see. I mean, he needs to play more games in order for us to really make a full judgment on that. He needs to start more games for us to really assess the situation. But he doesn't have the hold-up. Jose Mourinho's team require that focal point. They require that. He usually likes the big man who can hold up the ball, bring others into play, wingers in particular, attacking midfielders, get that link up there. He doesn't look like he has that. Whenever he has the ball, he doesn't look to hold it either. That's not an instinct of his. So it's clear to see that he's not that kind of player. And then running the channels, he's not great at that either. I thought he was. He showed signs of that in Europa League games where the assist for Lucas Moura on his debut as well. He showed that he could run channels in some moments, but when you don't have that much of the ball and we are breaking in that first half, the time, the possession he lost in that final third it's not that of a level of player that you want. And Jose, I can see why Jose has dropped in, but at the same time, again, players got to play their way into form, and that's the way you're going to get the best out of them. And that chance as well, you've got to bag it. You've got to bag that.
The header.
You have to, when you're not playing that many games and when you really want to show that you are worthy of the opportunity, you have to bag that. And he didn't take his chance.
So Owen, obviously we've spoken a lot on the pod, pretty much until we're blue in the face, in terms of needing another option when Kane isn't fit. We've seen two managers now have options, but not utilize them as often as maybe we would deem as sensible. So Vinicius currently sits as pretty much third choice in terms of the centre forward spot. What do we put that down to? Is that just a symptom of Kane and Son being so great, or is there something deeper to the options that we've been bringing in?
I mean, Vinicius, I don't think he's had enough minutes in the league, for one. I mean, I thought he started off okay. Like, to us, he made a few decent runs into the channels, but just didn't do anything with the ball. I just think whoever we bring in, there's just going to be a massive drop off in quality either way. I mean, if anything, do you know what? I think we missed Llorente in some games where he actually came in and did a job for us when we actually did use him. Like, I mean, my brain's mostly fried. I can't lie. Like that game turned me into a courtside Karen. So, I mean, it was annoying seeing Vinicius, his hold-up play being as bad as it was, considering he's 6'4", and Brazilians should be fairly techie with the feet and the futsal. There was a moment even when in the first half where Son was clean through on goal once Vinicius got it on the turn and he didn't play the pass and just ran into trouble. It's a shame. Do you know what? I think this one's on Jose, to be honest. Like, for one, he hasn't given him proper minutes, especially in the league. And two, I think a better coach could get better out of a lot of our fringe players, like not just Vinicius, but a better coach who, something like Marcus Bean said on the previous pod, on the Wickham pod, was saying that managers, he prefer managers who kind of are person to person kind of coaching rather than just being seen as a cog in the system, which is how I think he sees Vinicius for sure. I think a coach who works person to person to improve them and improve them to suit said coach or manager's system would get better out of him. Like, it wouldn't even just be Vinicius. I think players like Sanchez would improve. I think Winks and Bergwijn would improve as well. So, yeah, I would put this one on Jose.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. In the same way, I've got to stay consistent. He's reminding me of Janssen. I can't lie. Like, this is Vinicius Janssen as far as I'm concerned. Not because he's a bad player, not even because I felt like Vincent Janssen was particularly bad. But for me, the treatment is identical. These guys are feeding off of scraps when it comes to minutes. They're very much viewed as understudies or emergency backups. And that can only be detrimental to the confidence of a player. I mean, going back to the point I made about Bale and Doherty playing a lot of minutes on the right-hand side, the best moments from Vinicius have come with Lucas Moura playing next to him, or near to him at least. Lucas Moura was nowhere to be found. He didn't start the game. It would have been a logical solution for me to put little pockets of chemistry around the pitch. But the more we keep just throwing these new lineups, these new shapes, we're just going to keep seeing the same repetitive situation where there's no rhythm, there's no intensity, there's no real outlet for anybody. No one knows where each other are. Like, we've literally become if Kane and Son aren't linking, there is no attack.
It's all improvised, man. It just is.
On Son as well. Obviously, we did the Discord live, and there was a lot of chatter. Less so chatter, but a lot of screaming and shouting about how anonymous Son is. For a bit of context, in first 11 games of the season, league games this is, 907 minutes, he had 10 goals, 3 assists. Between games 12 and 22, he's had 889 minutes, 2 goals, 3 assists. So a substantial drop-off. What do we make of that? Is that just a symptom of him being in unsustainable form, or is it time to start being a little bit worried about his production?
I think it's too soon to be worried. Firstly, I think it's too soon to be worried. I think the output that we were seeing Son put in, week out, I think we'd be very lucky to see that sustained over the period of the entire season. I think it's difficult for any player to have that level of intensity throughout. Obviously, our talisman, his main link-up player, we have to acknowledge that guy's gone. So that's, undeniably going to have an impact, not just on his performance, but also his confidence. Because I think one of the commentators mentioned during the match today, actually, that it was Rio Ferdinand, furthermore, before the match started. He said the only time he's going to make a run is when Ndombele's on the ball. And, he weren't lying. And the fact of the matter is Ndombele was marked out of the game today. He did not have a comfortable game. They made it feel like a London derby, which it was. So Son's performance, I wouldn't necessarily say it's dependent on having Kane on the pitch, but it's dependent on service. And I think if we don't have the creative people around him to give him those balls, to run onto, to run in behind, to come short at times, to play off, then realistically, I don't know what our expectations are going to be. And we haven't got that creative solution. We do have it in Ndombele, but we can't rely solely on him. We haven't got it in Lamela, in my opinion. There's times where Lamela does show flashes of brilliance, and I know some people rate him. I do, but no, man, I can't see him doing more than what Dele Alli gives you personally. But I'm a Dele Alli fan, so it is what it is. But yeah, man, Son, I'm disappointed. I think Son will still come good, but he will be the first one to acknowledge that he's not playing at the level that we expect him of. Not even that we expect of him, but we expect of a decent player to play like, especially if he's going to be, solidifying that first team spot. But that's just in recent weeks. And I think, no player can have that level of consistency. We're talking about 10 goals in 900 minutes over the course of a Premier League system. I think that's really, really challenging.
So for some additional context, and I'll throw this one over to Jack, because obviously you're very vocal in saying that most of our squad is shit. So let's challenge one of our top class players. So Son has no goal in 5 league games. He hasn't scored since the Leeds game on January 2nd. What do you put that down to? Because it's only been 2.5 games without Harry Kane.
So I can't make Son blameless in this. I mean, he's got credit in the bank, which is why he can get away with an off day or two. But it's been a month, man. It's been a month. This guy, way before the season, even when people were calling him world class when he was on fire this season, I've always maintained, and I still will maintain, this guy only becomes world class when he hits 30 goals in a season, because he hasn't done that yet, and he still could, but you have to hit world class numbers if you want to be called world class. We're in an era now where players, wide forwards, whatever you call it, they are bagging those numbers, and he's not world class until he does that. That, as well as not having these dry patches, these annual dry patches he tends to have a season, and it's happening again. It's not something we're not used to. He will have moments where he looks absolutely unplayable and one of the best players in the world, but then he'll also have patches like these where it looks like he's just either burnt out, isn't in the game, looks like he's hiding almost sometimes. This is happening yet again, and that's something that I think he needs to work on, because at the end of the day, it's something that he does every season. But it isn't the only factor. I won't put him as a solitary factor. The style of play, we are shocking right now. The form is awful, and obviously we're not facilitating any of our attacking players right now. Jose Mourinho doesn't do that. And I think
on that note, actually, that's an interesting point, and I want to expand on that. We all know that our style of play is almost a black hole for any sort of enjoyment, entertainment, or attacking flair or patterns in general. Owen, what do you feel he can add to his game from like a stylistic point of view to help us not be so reliant on having that tandem and actually relying on him as a sole source of creativity?
As in who? Son to improve?
Son.
I know I think he needs to carry on doing what he's doing, but on a more consistent basis. Furthermore, I mean, in regards to his recent form, I think he just looks burnt out, to be honest, being the root cause of his problems. And on top of that, it's purely because we over-rely on him. We do need help across other areas of the pitch. I mean, we put Stocks in Bergwijn to come good, but he wasn't great today. In terms of today as well, like, I can't lie, Tanguy was a bit off it. Like, I wouldn't say it's because of his stamina, per se. I just think his final ball just wasn't what it normally is. But I would encourage him to keep on doing the same things he's doing, i.e. with Kane. But I mean, we need someone else to strike a bit of a partnership with Kane and Son as well. Like, whether it be from the right wing, whether we end up bringing another creator who's been injured or in the transfer market in the summer. And we need to be able to facilitate him more so he doesn't have to come deep, which isn't his strengths. And we essentially just don't have to rely on him as much.
It's interesting you say that, because I think part of, as you've mentioned, him being burnt out is a symptom of the style of play more than anything else in terms of how I view it. If you're running 40, 50 yards every game to get on the end of a ball, you're going to start to feel it in your legs. And with the absence of build-up play and without that creative outlet, I can see how someone who is tasked to just run in behind and get on the end of a final ball, how that can become difficult for them to get into a game. The reason I ask that is we're not seeing him really involved in build-up. He's not really linking up with anybody. He's not showing for the ball in a lot of instances, and it has become quite one-dimensional, for lack of a better description.
I think there is a better description. I think that's pretty bang on.
Precisely, and for me, that's a little bit worrying. I can't attribute all the blame to the player, because a lot of the time you're just going to do what you're told. But as has been mentioned, the world-class players do find ways to be effective on a football pitch when their team needs it. Obviously, we've debated left, right, and centre in terms of whether or not Son is that player. But for me, that's a key component in what he needs to do. It's less to do with the statistics. It's more about, in those decisive moments, taking the game by the scruff of its neck and doing what needs to be done in order to get us over that hump. And so far in this new year, I find it quite difficult to say that he's done that. The elephant in the room here, Jose Mourinho. We've done a good job of not making this the Jose pod. He's been mentioned quite a few times. I mean, 3 losses on the bounce. That accounts for half of our losses over the course of the Premier League campaign. Where do we go from here? What do we need to see from Jose to not be calling for his head with the placards and the banners like them other guys down the road?
Yeah, it's too soon for us to be irrational. I don't think we need to start panicking. It's 3 losses. We definitely need to dust off. We definitely need to get out of that losing habit. We definitely need to compose ourselves. On the subject of Jose, I like to think he's got the maturity to handle this. You know, he's an experienced manager. That being said, I was listening to the commentators and they mentioned that he's never lost 3 on a trot before. Or 2 home games in a way, or 2 home games in a row or something like that. So that's disappointing. But, you know, I think that's probably for a reason. it probably means that he can get under the player's skin. He can, pull people together, get a response. But the issue with Jose is sometimes the response can be a bad one. And then, he's known for causing disruptions in the dressing room. He's known for having issues with players, with agents, and so on. So, it can go left incredibly quickly. But I like to think he's got enough credit in the bank to turn things around. I'm not in panic stations yet, and I think today, tactically, I think it wasn't where we needed to be. I don't think we were creative. I don't think we were trying to be creative, and I don't think we really had a plan about how we was going to progress that ball, whether it was through the channels, whether it was through the middle, whether it was going to be route one. There didn't seem to be any real strategy. We was kind of just holding on and just trying to link up somehow. So I think he needs to take a real long look at himself. The players need to take a long look at themselves because they're not blameless in this. Yeah, the first things first is if you haven't got the energy and the enthusiasm to get on with the game, then you're not likely to win that game. And today, no one on the pitch looked like they really gave 100%, in my opinion. So
Jack, you've been very, very vocal in terms of the lack of quality in the side, and you've bemoaned a lot of our role players and all of these guys. But how much blame rests on the shoulder of Jose Mourinho at this point in time?
A lot of it. We've made signings. We've made signings over the summer, and he's been back to an extent, not fully. We still needed that centre back. We still need two, really. And I think we have had deficiencies at right back, even though Aurier's played out of his skin this season. We signed Doherty, who's been tragic, to say the least. But a lot of it does go down to Jose. And in regards to sort of the maturity comment of Jose, I kind of disagree. We've seen what he's done before when things don't go his way, and he does throw his toys out of the pram. And I can see, I don't know, the signs of the body language of the players. The players aren't blameless, of course, but the body language of the players. You're paid £15 million. You should be getting some tune out of our attacking players at the very least, because our attacking players is where most of our talent lies in this squad. Yet he's playing a football that completely stops it from getting the best out of those players. And it doesn't make any sense. And the fact that our defenders are already bad and he plays a style which puts even more pressure on them, just, again, it bewilders me completely. The fact that a manager of such caliber in the past just can have such a mindset like this. And it's just beyond like, ridiculous now. The signs are all there for him to be gone, basically. The signs are all there. all the signs that...
No, man, it's too soon for that, man. Give it time.
I'll tell you what. Just before you respond, I'll tell you why. All the signs when it went wrong at Chelsea, when it went wrong at Man United, it's already there. Unless he gets backed, unless he gets backed, unless this man gets the backing that he demands, which I can't see happening, it won't happen. But unless he gets that, it's gonna go tits up, and just waiting is sort of prolonging the inevitable. So what I suggest personally is, either sack him after the League Cup, because he at the end of the day, he's Jose Mourinho. He lives for these games, or you sack him just before the League Cup and get a new manager bounce for that one game.
So we wait until April to sack him.
We'll see.
I can't lie. I think it's inevitable that he's going to stay to the summer no matter what. I mean, I've been an apologist for Jose and for most of the season up until ultimately the Brighton game. Like he had all the excuses that he's living in London now. He's got a new philosophy apparently, which I had seen a bit of before the West Ham game, but he down tools on that. And obviously he hired Sacramento with the ideology that he's going to kind of marry his ideas to João Sacramento's and play a bit more on the front foot. I wasn't expecting like rock and roll football, don't get me wrong, but It's just like when you've got to this stage now, and he's been in charge for a year now, over a year, just over, and we still haven't seen those things which he's said he's going to implement. Then I think it's time to look forward in the summer. But obviously, with it being inevitable that he's going to stay until at least the summer, he can only really go to basics. What I want to see is at least a familiar centre-back partnership, which starts most games, and a clear one. I would go with Sanchez and Alderweireld at the moment, but I mean, he could pick anyone as long as there's a consistent partnership there. I think that would help us out a lot. Obviously, keeping it 4 at the back, basics. Delhi coming into the team to play as a 10 ahead of Tungi, staying deep. Even the 50% Tungi can give us a lot of balance, at least. And then at least a body which is going to be close to Son, which we saw quite a lot of benefits to that with Lamela actually getting in some dangerous positions. I mean, he wasn't ever going to do anything with the ball, but at least we looked a bit more just proactive, and we look like we can get some more combinations off to build some attacks. And just not playing Bale again, basis.
Just leave him there.
Just keep it basic and like don't go over the top. We can't really be playing Sissoko in midfield either. I know he ditched that for a few games because again I don't think he's tone deaf to a lot of the fans' criticisms. He noticed that Sissoko was a hindrance on their build-up play. He was very much a hindrance today. He played 90 minutes even though we had a third sub which we didn't use. I don't know. He can't really be starting games, to be honest. And yeah, I would keep it at that. Just
I think
keep it at basics to the summer.
The 2 points you've made, the back to basics, I definitely agree, and the sort of transition away from what we were seeing and what we were all quite positive about at the start of the restart, and then the start of the season up until the infamous West Ham game. For whatever reason, he's just ditched all of the modern principles that started to make us look like a bit of a threat. And that, for me, is a massive issue. We are a club who aren't synonymous with tangible success or glory, as I like to call it. And for me, one of the key components about being Spurs is about the stylistic aspect of our game. And we've seen over the last 10 years extreme highs in that regard and extreme lows. This reminds me of that sort of interim period where we had the AVB, put it through Bale and Inshallah. And then sort of mishmash dinosaur football that Sherwood gave us, where we had Chadley at centre midfield and square holes and round pegs and all of this shit. Like, I can't stand it. And I have to say this now, I have not felt this detached from Tottenham Hotspur Football Club since Tim Sherwood days. And that's dangerous territory for me. If I'm keeping it a buck, if the world was open, I wouldn't be attending games, because I'm not here to say, oh, entertain me. That's the only thing that matters. I love my football club and I love what it stands for on and off the pitch. But the toxicity around the club at the minute, and I don't feel like we're seeing it as much because the fans aren't in the stadium, would just drive me away. I'm not there to hear booing at halftime. I'm not there to basically spend cold nights in the stand next to guys that are screaming, pass it faster every 2 minutes. So me personally, this couldn't be further from what I love about Spurs and what I love about the game of football. So I'd probably have opted out. Wouldn't be spending money to sit in the cold. Wouldn't be spending £7 on a flipping pie that's lukewarm. I wouldn't be doing it. I'd be sitting my ass at home and watching this shit.
Watching Lion King, wouldn't you?
Say that again?
You'd be watching Lion King, wouldn't you?
Pretty much.
Come down.
That's kind of the son's request earlier.
I've literally started to turn the games off before 90 minutes, which is unfathomable for me. So that's an indicator of where I'm at with this regime and this sort of spell of form that we're under.
Do you have a manager in mind?
Funnily enough, it was Thomas Tuchel. That was a guy who, for me, when Pochettino's reign was clear to be coming to an end, that's who I was opting for. This who I was asking for. I could tell that sort of dynamic with PSG wasn't going to be long-standing. Lo and behold, we go for the dinosaur of football. And yeah, I'm not a fan of dinosaurs, as I tweeted last week. So yeah, I won't say get him out yet because we still got a cup final in April, so we've got a long time of shit football to endure. But it's not looking good for him. I'm going to be 100% honest.
Well,
I don't know how realistic it is, but if I had my pick of a manager, I'd probably go with Brendan Rodgers, you know?
yes, run me, Brendan.
You've got to argue.
In the summer.
Would he want to come? I mean,
I don't know.
That's
considering what he's got there, they've got a new training facility. They've got owners that back him to an extent. They're not obviously going to be Abramovich. But
we tick both those boxes as well, though.
Yeah, we
do tick those boxes.
They got a good recruitment.
Wasn't your first choice Hassan 9-0 though?
Yeah, it still is. He still is.
You want to be getting slapped 9-0 once every 12 months.
Actually, no, with Eric that centre back, he might get slapped 12, but alas, I think he's got things to learn, and I hope he learns out of Southampton quick. His footballing philosophy is great. We've seen the way Southampton play. We've seen the way they press, they engage in the game. He's getting a tune out of all of the players he's got at his disposal. And I think if I see him with Ndombele, imagine the things Ndombele could do under him. But this is the thing. Defensively, again, I get it. He got slapped 9-0 twice, but that Man United game context, man, that was a.
There's no. I'm not letting you do that, man. You lose your shit on a weekly basis when we lose, right? And you remove all context, then it goes straight to Serge Aurier, Harry Winks, and whoever else you've got that little short list for. So I'm not letting you hold that one, man. Hassan 9-0, nowhere near my damn club. Brendan, as far as I'm concerned.
I think he's a better manager than that result suggests, in my opinion. But
he may be, but I'm not taking that risk, man. Not after this little spell. Well, listen, lads. Does anyone have anything else to add to that Chelsea debacle and this putrid run of form that we're on? Or is that
Alli is the last thing I have to say. Get him back in the fold. We miss him. We miss him dearly. And I think it will come good at a time when we need him most. And it was criminal to play him against Chelsea. He's got experience of doing stuff and he to Chelsea lastly. So anyway, that's the last I'll say on that. Yeah,
I'm definitely hoping that he gets his run in the team as soon as possible because we cannot continue with this. Cannot continue with it. That about wraps us up this week. Obviously, as mentioned before, make sure you're following us on Twitter, on Instagram at Spurs_Touchline. Keep it locked to the YouTube as well. And yeah, pleasure as always, lads.
Pleasure.
See you in a bit.